Chapter 16, Section 2. The United States tries to stay neutral. For most Americans, war was a distant conflict that did not concern them. Few felt alarmed by its outbreak. In September 1914, Theodore Roosevelt smugly observed that the United States was lucky to be almost alone among the great civilized powers in being unshaken by the present worldwide war. Europe, a powder keg waiting to ignite. How did the murder of the Archduke in little-known Bosnia turn into a global conflict? The interaction of many factors led to war. One cause was a system of alliances that linked the European nations to each other. This system required member nations to come to one another's aid in case of attack. When the conflict started, these ties led to the division of Europe into two camps. Germany sided with Austria-Hungary, and they headed the Central Powers. They were later joined by the Ottoman Empire. France, Britain, and Russia led the Allied powers. In Europe, nationalism also created tensions. Nationalism is a strong feeling of pride in and loyalty to a nation or ethnic group. Nationalism led some European powers to put national interests first, regardless of the consequences for other countries. For example, pride in Germany's rapid growth and military power led Kaiser Wilhelm II to seek an overseas empire for his country. He wanted Germany to be a world leader. Smaller ethnic groups expressed their nationalism by seeking independence from rule by foreign countries. For example, Serbs in Bosnia who resented Austro-Hungarian rule wanted to unite with other Slavic peoples in Serbia. Another key factor was militarism, a policy of glorifying military power and values. When Germany modernized its army and added to its navy, Britain felt it had to do the same. Other major powers followed their lead. Soon the nations of Europe were in full-scale military buildup. Imperialism also added more fuel to the fire. By the 1880s, Britain and France had colonies in Africa and Asia that provided raw materials and markets for their products. Germany wanted its own colonies and a share of this lucrative trade. The only way for Germany to get the territory it wanted was to take it from someone else. Competition for trade and colonies further strained relations. Wilson adopts a policy of neutrality. Soon after the war began, Woodrow Wilson declared a policy of neutrality. The United States would not take sides in the conflict. It would offer loans and sell weapons and supplies to both sides. In a message to Congress on August 19, 1914, Wilson urged Americans to remain impartial in thought as well as action. The European war, he said, is one with which we have nothing to do, whose causes cannot touch us. Wilson's decision to stay out of the war pleased many Americans. Ever since George Washington had warned the nation to avoid entangling alliances, American presidents had tried to steer clear of European infighting. A Mississippi senator asserted, "There is no necessity for war with Germany. There is no necessity for war with any of the belligerent warring powers. 3,000 miles of water make it impossible for us to be drawn into that vortex of blood and passion and woe." As a neutral nation, the United States could make loans and sell supplies to both sides. U.S. leaders were also happy to have a way of helping American bankers, farmers, and businesses recover from a painful economic slowdown. Finally, members of the peace movement, who spoke out strongly against war, were in favor of this policy of neutrality. Yet the situation was more complicated than Americans' neutrality policy expressed. In 1914, more than 32 million Americans, a full one-third of the population, were either foreign-born or the children of foreign-born parents. Many of these Americans had strong emotional ties to their homelands and found it hard to remain neutral. Germans and Austrian Americans were sympathetic to the Central Powers. Irish Americans also sided with the Central Powers out of their long-standing hatred of the British. The majority of Americans, however, favored the Allies. Many felt connected by ancestry, language, culture, and democratic values. Still others had economic ties to Britain or France. While Americans debated neutrality, the war raged on two fronts in Europe. On the Eastern Front, Russia quickly advanced into Germany and Austria-Hungary. A German counterattack, however, stopped the Russian advance. In two key battles, the number of Russian casualties, soldiers killed, captured, or wounded, or missing, totaled about 250,000. On the Western Front, German troops easily rolled across Belgium and into France. Intense fighting by the British, French, and Belgian armies finally stopped the German advance, but not until German troops were within 30 miles of Paris. By the end of 1914, the war on the Western Front had turned into a long and bloody stalemate, or deadlock. Neither side was able to knock out its enemies, and yet neither side was willing to sue for peace.